Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering college diversity backlash goes nuclear. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from the Chronicle of Higher Education. Amid national backlash, colleges brace for fresh wave of anti-DEI legislation. From the Cornell Daily Sun. Inside the backlash to diversity, equity, and inclusion at Cornell. Also from the Cornell Daily Sun. Ways and Means Committee Chairman challenges Cornell's tax-exempt status over response to Hamas attacks and the treatment of Jewish students. That is such a serious attack and something Cornell needs to take very seriously because, for example, Cornell, which owns $2.7 billion in tax-exempt property, they would have to pay roughly $32.5 million in property taxes if their status is revoked, and Cornell had to pay the city of Ithaca tax rate of $12 per $1,000 in property value, over 8 times what they're currently paying to the city of Ithaca. From the New York Post, major Cornell donor pulls funding over toxic DEI culture, pens letter calling for president's resignation. In Utah bans diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on campus and in government. In Kentucky bill would ban college DEI and race-based scholarships. And if you're like me, you're thinking, what do you mean race-based scholarships? You're going to exclude people from a scholarship based on their race? Currently, they have that in Kentucky. From the Chronicle of Higher Education, amid national backlash, colleges brace for fresh wave of anti-DEI legislation. At least 14 states this year will consider legislation that could dismantle the ways college admissions attempt to correct historical and structural gender and racial disparities and make campus climates more inclusive, according to a Chronicle of Higher Education analysis. The Chronicle has identified at least 19 bills that would be considered in the upcoming months that seek to ban the employment and funding of diversity, equity, and inclusion offices, the use of pledges by faculty and staff to commit to creating a more inclusive environment on campus, commonly known as diversity statements, mandatory diversity training, and identity-based preferences for hiring and admissions, meaning giving people opportunities for jobs and letting them into colleges based on their skin color, their gender, their sexual preferences. The move to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, as they've become known, has been supercharged with the resignation of Claudine Gay, Harvard University's first black president, over plagiarism charges, her handling of the protests surrounding the Israel-Hamas war, and the belief that she unfairly benefited from discriminatory hiring practices. Gay, quote, is the poster girl, if you will, for a lot of the complaints and critiques about higher education in the last few years. She was dean of the faculty, she implemented DEI programs and got kudos for that, and rode that to the Harvard presidency, said Ilya Shapiro, a senior fellow and director of constitutional studies at the Manhattan Institute. She was a bureaucrat that crystallized DEI structures. There seems to be a window, a policy push window, against DEI that is open. And that's absolutely true. They're getting pushback everywhere. Since the Chronicle began tracking DEI legislation in early 2023, 49 bills have been introduced across 23 states. Almost 24 of those bills last year were either tabled, failed to pass, or vetoed, while 7 bills in 5 states were signed into law. The passage of those laws turned DEI programs and departments charged with serving minority students upside down in those states. That's what's going on in Utah right now. From KSL.com, Utah University is gauging impact of new diversity, equity, and inclusion law, which bans DEI in colleges and government, and changes that it will require. Texas Tech University, for example, renamed its Black Cultural Center to be the Student Enrichment Center, according to local media, and the University of Houston shuttered its LGBT Resource Center. The origin of the political campaign to dismantle colleges' DEI efforts traces back to January 2023, when the Manhattan Institute and the Goldwater Institute created a playbook for lawmakers wishing to oppose DEI. In his proposal, scholars describe DEI offices and their staff as a kind of revolutionary vanguard on campuses. Their livelihood can only be justified by discovering, really manufacturing, new inequities to be remedied. The proposal characterized DEI offices as divisive and claimed they enforce critical race theory and related political orthodoxies as official campus policy. This has led, according to the authors, to a chilling of free speech and conservative viewpoints on campus, and has stoked hostility aimed at what they call white cisgendered males. It's white males. It's not cisgendered males. Cisgender is a slur. We don't accept that. The Manhattan and Goldwater Institutes advise lawmakers to steer clear of interfering with classroom instruction or research so as not to be seen as calling for censorship. Most, if not all, of the language used in the Manhattan and Goldwater Institute's playbook would appear in the legislation pushed since the beginning of 2023. Christopher Rufo, who helped write the proposal with Shapiro and Matt Beinberg, Director of Education Policy at the Goldwater Institute, posted to Twitter in January 2023 that he and other conservatives hope to undo decades of liberal ideological dominance in the academy. Quote, left-wing radicals have spent the past 50 years on a long march through the institutions, Rufo tweeted, following his appointment to the board of New College of Florida. We're going to reverse that process starting now. Advocates of DEI efforts say colleges have a long legacy of discrimination and lack of diversity in their ranks. Consider that black students accounted for 7.4% of those admitted to selective higher education institutions in 2021, despite black Americans accounting for 13% of the population enrolled in undergraduate education. Even when admitted, those students can feel isolated or experience racist acts while on campus, like discriminating against them because of their skin color. That's what the DEI people are doing to everyone else on campus. And as far as the percentage of the population and the people admitted to higher education, sorry, it's all merit-based there. It's going back to be merit-based. Affirmative action was thrown out by the Supreme Court. So they're going to have more and more merit to make it, not just in college, but in the larger private industry as well. We're going back to that. Colleges need a collective and explicit strategy to tackle those forms of discrimination, DEI advocates say. Well, it's just a ridiculous concept that you're going to discriminate against some people because of their immutable characteristics, because you claim that historically other people were discriminated against. You can't have collective guilt like that. This is not some kind of communist country. Last spring, the fight over diversity, equity, and inclusion offices operating in higher education intensified as state lawmakers pushed bill after bill aimed at eliminating or curbing DEI efforts, with some success. North Carolina lawmakers overrode the governor's veto, banning diversity statements at community colleges and the University of North Carolina. North Dakota banned diversity statements and joined Tennessee in prohibiting mandatory diversity training. Wisconsin lawmakers held up pay raises for the entire public higher education sector until college officials redirected DEI funding. When the majority of legislative sessions ended just before the summer of 2023, it appeared the fever over anti-DEI legislation broke with it, but it proved to be simply a pause in what has become a second push against diversity, equity, and inclusion work in colleges. The Israel-Hamas war became a flashpoint for campus protest and deepened political divisions. The rhetorical fights around the war adopted language often associated with DEI offices. Israelis were seen by student groups on the left as colonizers, a word commonly used in left-wing circles to describe not only the European forces that physically subjugated the indigenous populations of the Americas, Africa, and Asia, but also white Americans who move into and gentrify black neighborhoods. Israelis were criticized as oppressors operating an apartheid state. These accusations were seen by conservatives as evidence of the work of DEI offices to frame conflicts along identity lines and view people as either oppressor or oppressed. That's exactly what they do. And that created, conservatives believe, room for hate speech sanctioned by DEI and the left. Quote, structures in DEI fomented anti-Semitism, Shapiro said. And with Gay and other college professors on the defensive, opponents of DEI pounced. Many don't expect this wave to cease anytime soon. Notice when it's the political opposition of Democrats and the establishment, they always use the phrase pounce when they get caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing. The conservatives pounce. The Republicans, you never heard about Democrats pouncing. That's a phrase to use only people who are normal people or conservatives when they catch you doing something. Quote, the national conversation around DEI that has emerged in the resignation of Claudine Gay will open the floodgates for more attacks on DEI, said Khalil Gibran Mohammed, a professor of history, race, and public policy at Harvard Kennedy School. As 2024 approached, lawmakers began yet another attack on DEI. So far this year, new bills have been filed in Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina. And while the broadsides against DEI have percolated in state legislatures, they have also become favorite talking points for some conservative governors in an election year. In December, Governor Kevin Stitt, a Republican of Oklahoma, came out strongly against DEI, and signed an executive order prohibiting the state from spending money on DEI offices in state agencies. The order also prohibits mandatory diversity training and bans the use of diversity statements. Quote, in Oklahoma, we're going to encourage equal opportunity rather than promising equal outcomes, it said. Encouraging our workforce, economy, and education system to flourish means shifting focus away from exclusivity and discrimination and towards opportunity and merit. We're taking politics out of education and focusing on preparing students for the workforce. On January 2nd, Representative Tim Jimenez, a Republican of Utah, pre-filed a bill prohibiting public or private employers from requiring training that compels employees or applicants to believe in or adhere to certain concepts related to race, color, sex, or national origin. Quote, what's happened is identity politics and philosophies have infiltrated what I think were very well-meaning ideas and programs, said Governor Spencer Cox of Utah during a news conference in December. What we're really actually seeing is the reverse, that we're drawing battle lines and that we're using identitarianism to force people into boxes and victimhood. And I don't think that's helpful. For many students of color, the fight against DEI feels like an affront to their existence on campus. At Ohio State University, the Frank W. Hale Jr. Black Cultural Center is the hub of DEI work and efforts to help students of color navigate college life. For the roughly 8% of the students at Ohio State who identify as African American, the center is a place where they can meet with staff members who share their cultural experience and can relate to the challenges they face on campus. Ohio is considering a bill that would do away with most DEI efforts, though the bill has struggled to gain traction. The idea of closing DEI offices is a slap in the face, said Breel Shorter, a sophomore at Ohio State. Quote, it's extremely hurtful. We have one building that is a safe haven, Shorter said. The simple things like tutoring through our DEI office, simply giving inner city kids from Ohio a chance to go to school, is being attacked. You could keep actually doing all of those things. You just can't do it based on people's skin color and expect the state to pay for it. That's incredibly inappropriate. And of course, it's not legal. Just because some people have gotten away with doing some illegal things and no one has stopped them in the last couple of years, it doesn't mean they're not going to be stopped. And thank goodness they're being stopped. Like many students, Shorter is attuned to the rising cost of college and the criticism that student demands for a sense of belonging and inclusiveness on campus are both difficult tasks and goals that may not have held as much importance with previous generations of students. For Shorter and many students, college is a social experiment where people from different backgrounds exchange ideas, and for the less fortunate, a place to make connections that can lift them up the socioeconomic ladder. College is a place for making connections and networking and improving yourself on the socioeconomic ladder, no matter what your skin color is. It's not based on inclusivity. That is what college has always been. Quote, I think that's another confusion on what black students want now versus what they wanted before. The cost is driving the desire for more inclusion, and we understand that it's not what you know, but who you know. No, it's both. It's what you know and who you know. So you need to know your stuff. It's going to be based on merit, but you also need to network so that people are aware that you're meritorious and you're capable of doing something that maybe they need to be done. So in that way of making college more inclusive and improving the sense of belonging goes a long way to helping students of color and people from disadvantaged backgrounds, Shorter said. Others see DEI efforts as a distraction from structural inequalities that colleges create. Quote, DEI offices are focused on the least impactful inequalities on campus, said Tyler Harper, an assistant professor of environmental studies at Bates College. DEI is a way for colleges and universities to appear progressive when they are in fact engines of inequality, through student debt placed on black and brown students who they purport to be lifting up. Are black and brown students the only ones who have debt, or are they just the only ones that these people care about? Harper believes that DEI offices are not simply ignoring those bread and butter issues, but that they were erected to deflect attention from students' concerns about the skyrocketing costs of college. Well, part of the skyrocketing costs of college is all the administrative offices for DEI. Maybe this guy's got a good point. Let's just get rid of all the DEI offices throughout all colleges in the United States. I like this guy. I think he knows what he's talking about. Quote, after 2011, the Occupy Wall Street movement and the rising movement against student debt, colleges knew they had a problem and they were getting all this bad press, Harper said. Institutions need to slap a smiley face on all that. Harper said that he doesn't support the legislative efforts against DEI because those attacks strip away part of its mission. He would prefer that DEI be rolled into the Human Resources Office, where it could focus on the mission of diversifying the workforce and the faculty, procurement, and diversity training. But what has gotten lost in the smokescreen of training is that the DEI offices set standards for fair hiring and human resources functions, Harper said. There's a value in setting those HR standards. As the state legislative cycle gears up, observers believe DEI could face even harsher criticism and attacks in the upcoming year. Mohammed of Harvard Kennedy School anticipates that lawmakers will look at procurement practices designed to purchase goods and services from minority-run firms. Why would they be looking at those? Why would they look at procurement practices, which are buying practices? Because they discriminate against people based on their skin color. Only people of certain skin colors, genders, or sexual preferences get opportunities to have their products or services purchased. They don't get contracts unless they fit the DEI mold. Of course, lawmakers should be going after that. Shapiro thinks additional outside pressure from wealthy donors and financiers like Bill Ackman will be aimed at DEI. Well, people are paying attention to what is happening in higher education, Shapiro said. That's absolutely correct. Major donors are absolutely furious at Ivy League institutions in particular because they see now this DEI stuff really is poison. They're pulling donations. Bill Ackman pulled donations. Recently, billionaire Ken Griffin pulled donations. Ken Griffin has donated $500 million to Harvard and has said right now he's not interested in donating one more dollar to Harvard until they change their ways. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.